I'm Rachel Mitchell, 32, and my world collapsed when Dad died last month. My older brother Garrett, 36, has always been the golden child, and now he's convinced he'll inherit everything, our childhood home and Dad's contracting business worth millions. You'll get nothing, he smirked yesterday. Dad always favored me. The smugness in his voice as he planned his future with our family legacy made my blood boil. Little did he know that Dad's true wishes would soon be revealed, turning Garrett's certainty into shock. If you're watching this from somewhere where family betrayal hits close to home, hit that subscribe button and stick around. You won't believe what happened when we finally met with the lawyer. Growing up, I spent countless hours in Dad's workshop, the sweet scent of cedar and pine embedding itself in my memories. While Garrett was out winning football trophies, I was learning how to sand against the grain and the difference between a mortise and tenon joint. Our family business, Mitchell Family Contracting, started in our garage when Dad was just 24, with nothing but determination and a second-hand table saw. 38 years later, it had grown into a respected company employing 65 people and handling major commercial projects across 3 states. Dad, James Mitchell to his clients, Jimmy to his friends, built the business on principles of quality craftsmanship and honesty. A Mitchell never cuts corners, he'd say, guiding my small hands as I helped him measure twice before cutting once. Even at 8 years old, I understood the pride in his voice. He'd walk me through construction sites, introducing me to everyone from architects to apprentices, explaining every phase of the projects in detail I could understand. When Mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, I was only 10. For 2 years, our family centered around hospital visits and treatment schedules. Garrett, 14 at the time, retreated into sports and friends, while I stayed closer to home, often sitting in Dad's workshop while he lost himself in woodworking to manage his grief. After Mom died, when I was 12, something shifted in our family dynamic. Dad tried his best to attend Garrett's games and my art shows equally, but there was an unspoken distance growing between my brother and the rest of us. While I found comfort continuing to learn from Dad, Garrett seemed determined to forge his own path. He excelled in high school, earned a football scholarship, and majored in business administration. When he graduated, Dad immediately offered him a position in the company's management team. "The business needs someone with your education," Dad told him proudly at his graduation dinner. "I've got the hands-on experience, but you understand the financial side better than I ever will." For the next decade, Garrett climbed through the ranks of Mitchell Contracting. He modernized our accounting systems, negotiated better deals with suppliers, and expanded our marketing reach. From the outside, it looked like the perfect partnership, Dad's craftsmanship and Garrett's business acumen. But inside the family, tensions were brewing. When Dad's heart problems began 3 years ago, Garrett increasingly took over day-to-day operations. I had become a high school art teacher by then, but still spent weekends and summers working with Dad on special projects. We'd restored vintage furniture together, designed custom cabinetry for select clients, and even built a community playground pro bono. These weren't the company's most profitable ventures, but they were Dad's passion projects, the work that still lit up his eyes. "Garrett doesn't understand that not everything is about the bottom line," Dad confided in me one evening as we finished a handcrafted dining table for a local family. "He's brilliant with numbers, but sometimes I wonder if he sees what makes our work special." As Dad's health deteriorated, our conversations grew more serious. 6 months before he died, during one of our weekend workshop sessions, he paused while showing me how to inlay walnut into maple. "I've taken care of everything, Rachel," he said, his weathered hand resting on mine. "The business, the house, I've made arrangements. Don't worry." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. We didn't discuss details, it felt too final, too much like accepting he wouldn't be around much longer. Instead, I trusted that whatever arrangements he'd made would be fair. Despite Garrett's increasing control over the business, I never doubted Dad's sense of fairness. When Dad passed away from a massive heart attack on a quiet Sunday morning, the initial outpouring of support was overwhelming. Hundreds attended his funeral. Employees past and present, clients, suppliers, and community members whose lives he'd touched. Garrett gave a moving eulogy about Dad's business acumen and vision. I spoke about his craftsmanship and generosity. For a brief moment, united in grief, Garrett and I seemed to find common ground again. He hugged me at the cemetery, whispering, "We'll figure this all out together." I believed him. After all, we were the only family each other had left. That night, surrounded by casseroles and sympathy cards, I allowed myself to hope that Dad's death might heal the rift between us rather than widen it. I could never have imagined how quickly that hope would be shattered. 2 weeks after we laid Dad to rest, the subtle shift in Garrett's behavior became impossible to ignore. We had planned a family dinner at Dad's house, our childhood home, to begin discussing practical matters. I arrived early to prepare Dad's favorite pot roast recipe, a small tribute that brought me comfort. When Garrett and his wife Madison arrived, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "We need to talk about the transition," Garrett announced before even taking off his coat. "I've been running the business essentially solo for the past year anyway, so there shouldn't be many changes." "What do you mean by transition?" I asked, stirring the gravy with more force than necessary. Madison chimed in, her voice silky smooth. "Well, now that the business is officially Garrett's, there are some changes he's planning to implement. Changes that have been a long time coming." I nearly dropped the spoon. "Officially Garrett's? Has there been a reading of the will that I wasn't informed about?" My brother waved dismissively. "It's just a formality, Rachel. Dad and I discussed the succession plan extensively. You have your teaching career, you've never shown interest in running a construction business. That night was just the beginning." Over the next week, I noticed personal items missing from Dad's house, his collection of vintage woodworking tools, photographs from early projects, even Mom's jewelry that he'd kept in his bedside table. When I confronted Garrett, he shrugged it off. "I'm just organizing things. Some items belong at the company headquarters for historical value. The jewelry is safer in our home security system." Before I could formulate a response, he added with a patronizing smile, "Don't worry about these details, Rachel. Focus on your art classes and leave the business matters to me." The following weekend, I stopped by the company headquarters to pick up some of Dad's personal effects from his office. The receptionist, Judy, who had known me since I was in pigtails, gave me an odd look when I signed in. "Oh, Rachel. I thought you knew. Garrett cleared out your father's office on Tuesday. He's using it now." My stomach dropped. "He moved all of Dad's things? Without telling me?" Judy looked uncomfortable. "He mentioned something about storage until decisions were made about where everything should go." As I stood there processing this information, Garrett emerged from what had indeed been Dad's office, now completely transformed with modern furniture and none of the warmth Dad had cultivated over decades. "Rachel. Didn't expect to see you here." He was leading a group of people in business attire, clearly in the middle of a meeting. "Everyone, this is my sister. She teaches art at the local high school." Then, before I could even respond, he added, "If you'll excuse us, I need to get back to this meeting. I'm introducing myself as the new owner to our banking partners." New owner. The words echoed in my head as he disappeared back into the office, leaving me standing in the reception area like a stranger rather than someone who had grown up in this business. Over the next week, I tried repeatedly to discuss the inheritance situation with Garrett. Each time, he deflected or dismissed me. "The lawyers are handling everything," he'd say. Or, "These things take time, Rachel. Not that you need to worry about the details." The patronizing tone grew more pronounced with each interaction. Then, during a family dinner at his house, he openly mocked my concerns. "What exactly do you think you're entitled to, Rachel?" he laughed after I pressed him about the will. "Dad built this business with me. You were playing with clay and paint while we were securing million-dollar contracts." Madison snickered. "Besides, what would an art teacher do with a construction company?" "That's not the point," I insisted. "Dad always intended for both of us to be part of his legacy. I have a right to know what arrangements he made." Garrett leaned back in his chair, swirling his expensive scotch. Tell you what, I'll make sure you get Dad's old hammer and some fond memories. That should cover your contribution to Mitchell Contracting. The worst revelation came when one of Dad's longest-serving project managers, Carlos, called me privately. Rachel, I'm confused about something. Garrett told the team that you've explicitly stated you have no interest in being involved with the company moving forward. He said you told him you're focusing solely on your teaching career. Is that true? My blood ran cold. Absolutely not, Carlos. I've never said anything of the sort. Carlos's long pause spoke volumes. I thought as much. There are a lot of changes happening very quickly here. Many of us who worked closely with your father are concerned. By now, a month had passed since Dad's death, and there was still no formal reading of the will. When I mentioned this to my friend Bethany over coffee, her expression grew serious. Rachel, that's not normal. There should have been at least an initial meeting with the family attorney by now. Have you contacted him directly? I hadn't, trusting that the process would unfold as it should. That evening, I called Mr. Harrison, Dad's attorney for over 20 years. His secretary informed me he was unavailable but would return my call. Before he could, I received a text from Garrett, just had a productive meeting with Harrison. You should prepare for disappointment, sis. Dad knew who could handle his legacy and who couldn't. The systematic dismantling of my connection to my father's life work had begun, and I felt powerless to stop it. 6 weeks after Dad's funeral, I drove to our family home to collect some books I'd left in my old bedroom. When my key failed to work in the front door, confusion turned quickly to disbelief. Standing on the porch where I'd spent countless summer evenings with Dad, I was locked out of my own childhood home. I called Garrett immediately. Why doesn't my key work? Oh, that, he replied casually. We had the locks changed for security purposes. Madison was concerned about all the people who might have had access over the years. And you didn't think to give me a new key? My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. I didn't realize you'd need regular access. You don't live there anymore, Rachel. Neither do you. I snapped. It's still Dad's house, Garrett. Our family home. His laugh was cold. Technically, it's my house now. Or it will be once all the paperwork is finalized. I leaned against the door, suddenly needing support. What paperwork? There hasn't even been a reading of the will yet. Mr. Harrison and I have discussed the assets. It's just a matter of processing everything now. After hanging up, I drove straight to Bethany's apartment, shaking with a mixture of rage and desperation. I need to find Dad's papers, I told her. He must have kept copies of his will or trust documents somewhere in the house. Can you get in when Garrett's not there? She asked. The next day, I used the spare key hidden in the workshop behind the house, a place Garrett never visited if he could help it. Inside, I systematically searched Dad's home office, but all his filing cabinets had been emptied. The safe behind his fishing photograph stood open and bare. Even his computer was gone. While searching, I discovered something even more disturbing. Garrett had already begun selling family heirlooms. An email confirmation for an auction house was visible on a tablet he'd left on the kitchen counter, listing items including Mom's antique secretary desk and Dad's grandfather's pocket watch. My desperation grew as I realized how thoroughly Garrett was erasing our family's history. When I confronted him about selling these sentimental items, his response cut deep. They're just things, Rachel. Things that have financial value that can be better utilized for business expansion. Those things are our family history. I was nearly shouting now. You had no right to sell them without even consulting me. I don't need your consultation, he said dismissively. As the executor and primary beneficiary, these decisions are mine to make. The word primary caught my attention. So there is a will, and you have seen it? Garrett's momentary hesitation told me everything. Mr. Harrison is handling the legal aspects. You'll be notified when necessary. That evening, Bethany helped me research inheritance laws in our state. You need your own attorney, she insisted. Someone who isn't connected to your family or the business. I can't afford an expensive legal battle, I admitted. Teaching art doesn't exactly make me wealthy. What about speaking directly with Mr. Harrison? He was your dad's attorney, not just Garrett's. I tried calling Harrison's office again the next day, only to be told he was unavailable. When I asked when he might have time to meet with me, his secretary sounded uncomfortable. Mr. Harrison has been instructed to direct all Mitchell family matters through Garrett, as the executor. Meanwhile, the situation at Mitchell Contracting grew increasingly tense. Employees were caught in the middle, unsure of who had authority. Longtime staff who asked about my involvement were being sidelined or assigned to less desirable projects. Carlos called again to tell me Garrett had begun interviewing for a new project manager to replace him. He says I'm too old school, Carlos told me, the hurt evident in his voice. That I don't understand the direction the company needs to go. Dad valued your experience above everything, I assured him. You know more about proper construction than any business school graduate. Carlos sighed. Your father built this company on relationships and quality. Garrett talks only about profit margins and expansion. He's already cutting corners on materials for the Westlake project. That revelation chilled me to the bone. Dad would never approve of that. That's what I said. That's probably why I'm being pushed out. The situation reached a breaking point when employees began approaching me directly with concerns. When Maria from accounting called to tell me Garrett was restructuring the profit-sharing plan that Dad had implemented for long-term employees, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to find that will. I remembered Dad's safe deposit box at First National Bank. He had mentioned it years ago when storing Mom's wedding rings there after her death. Perhaps copies of important documents would be there too. But when I inquired at the bank, I discovered Garrett had already accessed and emptied the box as executor of the estate. That evening, I received the most cutting text yet from my brother, found Dad's collection of your childhood art projects. Didn't realize you were saving these for some reason. They're in the recycling if you want them. I rushed to the house, digging through the large recycling bin in the garage. There at the bottom were dozens of carefully preserved drawings, paintings, and small woodworking projects I'd made with Dad over the years. Each one labeled with the date and a note in Dad's handwriting about what he loved about the piece. Rachel's first dovetail joint, perfect angles, and Rachel's watercolor of the workshop, she captured the light beautifully. Sitting on the garage floor surrounded by these memories, something inside me finally broke. The casual cruelty of tossing away these treasured moments between Dad and me made one thing crystal clear: Garrett wasn't just taking the material inheritance, he was systematically erasing my place in Dad's life. That night, hands still stained with paint from rescuing my childhood artwork, I called an attorney of my own. 7 weeks after Dad's death, Garrett texted me that he was hosting a small business reception at the family home. He didn't invite me, I learned about it from Carlos, who assumed I would be there. It's being billed as a celebration of the company's new direction under Garrett's leadership, Carlos explained. Despite not being invited, I decided to attend. This was still my family home, filled with my memories, and I refused to be erased from the narrative of Mitchell Contracting. I chose my outfit carefully, a professional navy dress that Dad had always complimented, saying it reminded him of Mom. When I arrived, the driveway was lined with luxury cars. Inside, caterers weaved through clusters of people holding champagne flutes. I recognized many faces, longtime clients, business partners, and employees. Several greeted me warmly, looking confused when I explained I hadn't known about the event. Madison spotted me first, her smile freezing in place. Rachel. What a surprise. We didn't think you'd be interested in a business function. This is my family home, I replied evenly. And Mitchell Contracting is my family business. Before she could respond, I moved deeper into the crowd, exchanging pleasantries while straining to locate Garrett. I found him in Dad's study. Now stripped of personal photos and rearranged with modern furniture, holding court with several men in expensive suits. The acquisition of Parker Construction is just the first step, he was saying. Once we absorb their contracts and liquidate their equipment assets, we'll be positioned to expand into the commercial market in the eastern counties. What about the residential restoration division? Asked one man. Mitchell has always been known for quality craftsmanship in that sector. Garrett waved dismissively. That was my father's pet project. Low profit margins, labor-intensive work. We'll be phasing that out by year's end. My heart sank. The restoration division had been Dad's pride, where he took on historic homes and lovingly brought them back to life with period-appropriate techniques. It was where he and I had worked side by side most often. That division has loyal clients who specifically come to Mitchell for that craftsmanship, I interjected from the doorway. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to me. Garrett recovered quickly, flashing his corporate smile. Gentlemen, my sister Rachel. She occasionally helped Dad with some of the decorative elements of those projects. I did a lot more than decorative elements, I corrected, stepping into the room. Dad and I ran that division together for the past 5 years. One of the men extended his hand. James spoke highly of your work. He showed me the Victorian restoration on Maple Street, said the custom millwork was your design. Before I could respond, Garrett cut in. Rachel has her own career as an art teacher. She's not involved in the company operations. Actually, I said firmly, we haven't yet discussed my role going forward, as there hasn't been a proper reading of Dad's will. The awkward silence that followed was broken by Garrett's forced laugh. Always the dramatic one, my sister. Gentlemen, would you excuse us for a moment? Family matter. Once alone, Garrett's facade dropped. What the hell do you think you're doing? I could ask you the same thing. Selling off divisions Dad built from nothing? Planning acquisitions before you even legally control the company? I'm securing the future of Mitchell Contracting, he hissed. Something Dad entrusted to me, not you. You don't know that, I insisted. We haven't seen the will. Garrett stepped closer, lowering his voice. Dad knew you couldn't handle the business. He told me you'd just ruin everything he built. The words hit like physical blows. You're lying. Dad would never say that. Why do you think he spent those weekends with you in the workshop? Garrett sneered. It was a way to keep you occupied with little projects while he and I handled the real business. He humored your little artistic contributions because he felt sorry for you. I felt the room spin slightly. That's not true. Face reality, Rachel. You're the family charity case. The daughter who never quite measured up, playing with wood and paint while the men built an empire. His voice dripped with contempt. Dad left you out of his will because he knew you'd drive his life's work into the ground with your artsy ideals and complete lack of business sense. I wasn't aware that others had entered the room until I heard Madison's voice. Is everything okay in here? People are asking about the presentation, Garrett. I turned to see several guests, including Carlos, hovering uncertainly in the doorway. The realization that they had likely overheard Garrett's cruel words sent a flush of humiliation through me. Rachel's just leaving, Garrett announced. She's feeling a bit emotional today. I most certainly am not leaving, I said, my voice shaking. Not until you stop spreading lies about Dad's wishes. Madison stepped forward, placing a concerned hand on my arm that managed to feel both patronizing and threatening. Rachel, sweetie, maybe you need some professional help to process your grief. This obsession with the company isn't healthy. Obsession? I repeated incredulously. This is my family legacy too. Your legacy is a box of finger paintings in the garage, Garrett muttered, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. Several uncomfortable chuckles followed. Something snapped inside me. Years of being sidelined, months of watching Dad's health fail while Garrett positioned himself to take over, and weeks of systematic exclusion culminated in this moment of utter humiliation in my own family home. Tears spilled down my cheeks as I looked around at the faces, some embarrassed, some pitying, some clearly uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding before them. My father, I said, my voice breaking, spent 30 years teaching me every aspect of fine craftsmanship. He trusted me with restoration projects worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. He believed in my abilities and my vision for the artisanal side of this business. And I will not let you erase that, Garrett. Without waiting for a response, I pushed past Madison and fled through the crowd, ignoring the whispers that followed me. Outside in the cool night air, I leaned against my car, struggling to breathe through sobs. My phone buzzed with a text from Carlos. Are you okay? What Garrett said was wrong. Many of us know how much your father valued your contribution. His kindness only made me cry harder. I had lost not only my father but was now losing every connection to the life we had built together. As I drove away from my childhood home, I realized I had one option left, to finally get to the truth, no matter what it revealed. The next morning, I called Mr. Harrison's office again. This time, I didn't ask for an appointment. Please tell Mr. Harrison that if he doesn't agree to meet with me by the end of the week regarding my father's will, I'll be filing a formal complaint with the State Bar Association about his handling of the estate. 3 hours later, his secretary called back. Mr. Harrison would see me tomorrow at 2 p.m. The offices of Harrison, Weiss and Partners occupied the top floor of a modest building downtown. I had been here only once before, accompanying Dad to sign papers after Mom died. The reception area hadn't changed, same leather chairs, same landscape paintings, same hushed atmosphere of wealth quietly managing itself. I smoothed my skirt nervously, expecting to be told that yes, Garrett was the executor and primary beneficiary, and that my exclusion from the family business was legally binding. I had prepared myself for this confirmation, deciding that even if I received nothing, I would at least know the truth. When Mr. Harrison's assistant led me into his office, I was surprised to find the elderly attorney looking genuinely pleased to see me. Rachel, he said warmly, coming around his desk to shake my hand. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. I blinked in confusion. You have? Of course. I've called multiple times and sent several letters to your apartment. He gestured for me to sit. When those went unanswered, I tried reaching you through Garrett, who assured me he would coordinate a time for all of us to meet. A cold realization washed over me. I never received any calls or letters from you, Mr. Harrison. His bushy eyebrows drew together. That's concerning. Especially in light of what I've observed these past weeks. What do you mean? Harrison settled behind his desk, removing a thick folder from his drawer. Your brother has been quite proactive in handling what he believes to be his inheritance. He's met with me several times, requesting access to company accounts and property deeds. I've had to remind him repeatedly that nothing can be transferred until the will is properly executed, with all beneficiaries present. My heart began to race. All beneficiaries? Then I am included in the will? Harrison looked genuinely surprised. Of course you are, Rachel. Your father would never have excluded you. He opened the folder. In fact, James was quite explicit about his wishes. With trembling hands, I accepted the document he passed across the desk. It was Dad's will, dated just 4 months ago. I'll give you a moment to review it, Harrison said gently. But the key provisions are quite straightforward. As I scanned the legal language, certain phrases jumped out at me. To my children, Rachel and Mitchell and Garrett James Mitchell, I bequeath my ownership interest in Mitchell Family Contracting, to be shared equally between them. The family residence at 1472, Oakwood Lane, I leave solely to my daughter, Rachel. My collection of woodworking tools and equipment to be the sole property of Rachel, who shares my passion for the craft. Tears blurred my vision as I continued reading. Dad hadn't forgotten me. He hadn't dismissed my contributions or abilities. He had, in fact, ensured I would have an equal say in the business and sole ownership of our family home. There's more, Harrison said, passing me another document. Your father left this letter to be read along with the will. The envelope simply said "For Rachel and Garrett" in Dad's familiar handwriting. Inside was a 3-page letter. I read it slowly, drinking in Dad's words. My dear children. If you're reading this, I've moved on to whatever comes next, hopefully reunited with your mother who I've missed every day since she left us. I built my life around 2 treasures, my family and my business. Both bear our name, both represent my life's work, and both now pass to you. Garrett, you have a brilliant mind for business. You see opportunities and efficiencies I never could. You brought Mitchell contracting into the modern age with your innovations. I'm proud of your drive and ambition. Rachel, you inherited my hands and heart. You understand that what we build isn't just structures, but legacies of craftsmanship. You see beauty in grain patterns and joinery that others miss. Your restoration work has preserved our community's history while securing our company's reputation for excellence. I've always seen these differences between you as complementary strengths, not competing values. The business needs both to thrive. That's why I've left equal ownership to each of you. The house I leave to Rachel, as she has always appreciated its history and craftsmanship in ways Garrett never has. It was your mother's pride and joy, Rachel, and you've kept her spirit alive there. My tools belong with Rachel, who knows how to use them with the respect and skill they deserve. I have one condition for the business inheritance: you must work together for at least 1 year before either of you can sell your interest. Garrett, this means acknowledging Rachel's rightful place in the company. Rachel, this means engaging with the business aspects as well as the craftsmanship. If either of you refuses this condition, their share reverts to the other. I know there have been tensions between you. I blame myself for not addressing them more directly while I could. But I believe in both of you, and I believe that together, you can take what I've built and make it even greater. Remember that Mitchell isn't just a name on a business card, it's a promise of integrity, quality, and family. Honor that legacy, even when you disagree. With eternal love. Your Dad. I pressed the letter to my chest, feeling closer to Dad than I had since his death. Harrison cleared his throat gently. Your father was very clear about his wishes, Rachel. He spoke to me at length about his desire for both his children to carry on different aspects of his legacy. He was particularly concerned that Garrett might try to streamline things after his passing. He knew, I whispered. He knew Garrett would try to push me out. Harrison nodded solemnly. James was no fool. He understood both his children's strengths and weaknesses. That's why he built in the condition about working together. He believed the business needed both of you. Does Garrett know about these terms? He knows the broad strokes, that the business ownership is equal and conditional. He doesn't know about the house yet, or the specific contents of the letter. I've been waiting to conduct a proper reading with both of you present, as your father instructed. I sat back, processing everything. So legally, Garrett has no authority to sell company assets or make structural changes without my consent? Absolutely none, Harrison confirmed. Nor does he have any claim to the family home. Any actions he's taken in that regard are without legal standing. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight lifting from my shoulders. Dad had not forgotten me. He had not diminished my contribution. In fact, he had recognized it so clearly that he built safeguards to protect it. What happens now? I asked. Harrison's eyes twinkled with a hint of mischief unusual in a man of his professional standing. Now, my dear, we schedule the official reading of the will. And I think it's time your brother learned what your father really wanted. The following Monday, I stood on the porch of my family home, my home now, according to Dad's will, flanked by Mr. Harrison and a police officer. The officer's presence had been Harrison's suggestion. Given what you've told me about the locks being changed and items being removed from the property, he'd explained, we should have an official witness to prevent any disputes. When Garrett opened the door, his expression shifted rapidly from irritation to confusion to alarm as he registered the uniform beside me. What's going on? He demanded. Hello, Garrett, Mr. Harrison said pleasantly. I believe it's time we had that official reading of your father's will. I brought the documents for everyone to review. You could have called instead of bringing law enforcement, Garrett hissed, reluctantly stepping back to let us enter. Officer Davis is here to facilitate Rachel's legal access to her property, Harrison explained. According to your father's will, this house belongs solely to Rachel. Garrett froze. That's impossible. I assure you it's quite possible, and legally binding, Harrison replied, placing his briefcase on the entryway table. Is Madison home? She should hear this too, as it affects your living arrangements. Within minutes, we were assembled in the living room. Madison's face was flushed with anger as Harrison methodically went through the will's provisions: my sole ownership of the house, my equal share in the business, the conditions attached to our inheritance. This can't be right, Garrett interrupted repeatedly. Dad and I discussed succession planning. He wanted me to lead the company. Leading and owning are different matters, Harrison pointed out. Your father wanted you both involved, leveraging your different strengths. When Harrison read Dad's letter aloud, I watched Garrett's face. For a brief moment, something vulnerable flickered across his features, perhaps recognition of Dad's assessment of his strengths and weaknesses, or maybe just the impact of hearing our father's words again. But Madison's hand on his arm seemed to harden his resolve. This is clearly a recent change made when Dad was already in decline, Garrett argued. His judgment was compromised by his health issues. Harrison shook his head. I can attest to James's mental clarity when he executed these documents. Moreover, these provisions are consistent with intentions he expressed to me for years, not a recent change of heart. I'll contest it, Garrett threatened. I've already invested in business expansion based on my understanding of the inheritance. Any such investments were premature and without legal authority, Harrison stated calmly. As for contesting the will, you're welcome to try, but I should warn you that James anticipated this reaction. He left extensive documentation of his decision-making process, including video recordings of our discussions about his estate planning. Madison stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. We've already moved half our things in here. Then I suggest you begin moving them out, I said quietly. This is legally my house now. You can't just throw us out on the street, she protested. I'm not. I met my brother's gaze. You have 2 weeks to find alternative arrangements. That's more generous than the 0 notice you gave me when changing the locks on my family home. Officer Davis cleared his throat. I can confirm that's a reasonable timeframe from a legal standpoint. The next confrontation came 2 days later at the company headquarters. Harrison had suggested we call an all-staff meeting to clarify the new ownership structure. Walking into the conference room beside him, I felt a mixture of vindication and nervousness. Many employees looked surprised to see me in a formal capacity. Garrett arrived late, deliberately I suspected, and stood at the back of the room with his arms crossed while Harrison explained the situation. Mitchell Family Contracting is now equally owned by Garrett and Rachel Mitchell, he announced. Any major decisions, financial commitments, or structural changes require approval from both parties going forward. The room buzzed with whispers. Carlos caught my eye and gave me a subtle thumbs up. Additionally, Harrison continued, per James Mitchell's explicit instructions, both owners must actively participate in company operations for a minimum of 1 year before either can sell their interest. Garrett pushed off from the wall. While this technical ownership structure is being sorted out, day-to-day operations will continue under my direction as they have been. Actually, I interjected, that's not what Dad wanted. According to his letter, we're supposed to leverage our complementary strengths. My area of expertise is craftsmanship and restoration, exactly the division you were planning to eliminate. Several employees exchanged glances. It was clear this wasn't news to them. The residential restoration division operates at a loss, Garrett countered. It's a business decision to phase it out. It operated at a profit for 15 years under Dad's management, I corrected. It's only shown losses since you reallocated its resources and reassigned its most experienced staff 3 months ago. Carlos stepped forward. She's right. The division was profitable until the recent changes. The meeting grew increasingly tense as more employees began asking questions about Garrett's recent decisions, the reduced profit-sharing plan, the quality reductions on the Westlake project, the dismissal of 3 long-term employees. All necessary business decisions to position us for growth, Garrett insisted, but I could see doubt spreading across the room. When someone asked about the rumored acquisition of Parker Construction, I seized the opportunity. There will be no acquisition without thorough due diligence and approval from both owners, I stated firmly. Mitchell Contracting built its reputation on quality and integrity, not rapid expansion at the expense of craftsmanship. By meeting's end, the power dynamic had visibly shifted. Employees approached me with concerns and ideas, while Garrett huddled with his few allies from the financial department. Later that afternoon, he stormed into what had been Dad's office, which I had reclaimed that morning. "You've turned the staff against me," he accused. "After everything I've done to modernize this company." "I've simply clarified the actual ownership and management structure," I replied. "Dad wanted us to work together, combining your business sense with my commitment to craftsmanship. You're not qualified to make business decisions. You're an art teacher who occasionally helped Dad with his hobby projects." I stood, meeting his gaze. "Those hobby projects won the company 3 historic preservation awards and brought in our highest profile clients. And I have a business minor along with my art degree, not that you ever bothered to ask." His expression flickered with surprise before hardening again. "This arrangement is impossible. I'll buy you out." "Not an option for at least a year, according to Dad's will. And honestly, Garrett, after seeing how quickly you plan to dismantle what Dad built, I'm not inclined to sell to you even then. You can't run this company without me." "Maybe not. But you definitely can't run it without me, not legally, anyway. So we have 2 choices, work together as Dad wanted, or watch the company suffer while we fight." The next weeks brought a tenuous truce. Garrett grudgingly acknowledged my authority while looking for any opportunity to undermine it. But the company records told their own story. Once I gained access to the financial documents, I discovered concerning patterns, quality reductions that saved money short-term but risked our reputation, deferred maintenance on equipment, and most troubling, discrepancies in project billing that couldn't be easily explained. With Carlos's help, I began untangling the financial web Garrett had woven. When we presented our findings to Mr. Harrison, his expression grew grave. "These irregularities warrant further investigation," he advised. "Some may simply be aggressive business practices, but others skirt ethical and legal boundaries." Armed with this information, I called a private meeting with my brother. "We need to talk about the financial discrepancies Carlos and I have found." Garrett's face remained impassive, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. "Business practices you don't understand aren't automatically discrepancies." I slid a folder across the desk. "Double billing the Westridge project for materials that were actually used at the lakefront development isn't a business practice, it's fraud." "That was an accounting error," he dismissed, but his eyes betrayed concern. "And the substandard materials substituted on the municipal project? The one specifically prohibited in the contract? Another error?" Garrett leaned forward. "What exactly are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Dad built this company on integrity, and somewhere along the way, you lost sight of that." I closed the folder. "I'm not interested in legal battles or public scandals, Garrett. But these practices stop now. Or what? Or I'll have no choice but to bring in forensic accountants and let the consequences fall where they may." The company meeting the following week marked a turning point. Standing before the assembled staff, Garrett announced a strategic realignment to honor James Mitchell's legacy of quality. "After reviewing company operations with Rachel, we've identified areas where we can better uphold the Mitchell standard of excellence," he stated, the words clearly costing him. "The residential restoration division will not only continue but will be expanded under Rachel's direct supervision." The announcement continued with reversals of several other controversial decisions. I watched Garrett closely, sensing that his capitulation wasn't born of sudden conviction but of self-preservation. The financial irregularities I'd discovered had given me leverage he couldn't ignore. As the meeting concluded, an elderly craftsman who'd worked with Dad since the beginning approached me. "Your father would be proud," he said quietly. "Not just of you standing your ground, but of you finding a way forward that doesn't destroy what he built, including his relationship with your brother." His words gave me pause. In the satisfaction of reclaiming my place in Dad's legacy, I'd almost forgotten that Garrett was part of that legacy too. That evening, I invited Garrett to Dad's workshop behind the house, my house now. He arrived looking wary. "Why here?" he asked, eyeing the tools and wood with the same discomfort he'd always shown. "Because this is where Dad taught me what really matters about the Mitchell name." I ran my hand along a workbench Dad and I had built together. "It's not about profit margins or market share. It's about creating something that lasts, something you can be proud to put your name on." Garrett's expression remained guarded, but he didn't leave. "I know we see the business differently," I continued. "But Dad valued both perspectives. He believed the company needed both of us." "He left you the house," Garrett said, a hint of the old bitterness creeping in. "And he left you his office at the company," I countered. "He knew what mattered most to each of us." For a long moment, Garrett was silent, looking around the workshop that held so many memories for me and so few for him. Finally, he sighed. "I can't promise we won't disagree about the direction of the company. I'd be worried if we didn't. But we can disagree without undermining each other." It wasn't a warm reconciliation, but it was a beginning, a recognition that Dad's final wish for his children might not have been as impossible as it first seemed. Part 8, Healing and Lessons Learned. 3 months after the reading of Dad's will, I stood in the kitchen of my family home, my home now, baking Dad's favorite oatmeal cookies. The familiar rhythm of measuring, mixing, and shaping the dough grounded me, connecting me to countless memories of doing the same activity with Dad and Mom in this very kitchen. The house felt like home again. I'd moved in 6 weeks earlier, after Garrett and Madison relocated to a modern condo downtown that better suited their taste anyway. Room by room, I'd been restoring the warmth and character that had been temporarily stripped away. Dad's leather chair was back in the living room. Mom's garden paintings hung again in the hallway. And most importantly, Dad's workshop was once again a sacred space of creativity rather than a storage area for discarded memories. At Mitchell Contracting, a new balance had gradually emerged. True to the terms of Dad's will, Garrett and I were finding ways to leverage our different strengths rather than battle over control. It wasn't always smooth, we still had fundamental disagreements about priorities, but we'd established a workable system. Garrett oversaw the commercial construction division, modernizing operations and securing larger contracts that kept the company financially robust. I ran the restoration division, which had quickly returned to profitability once I reinstated Dad's quality standards and brought back several craftspeople who had left under Garrett's management. The company-wide Monday meetings sometimes grew heated, but they always ended with clear decisions that respected both the business necessities and the craftsmanship values that had built our reputation. Carlos, reinstated as senior project manager, served as an informal mediator between the divisions. "Your father would be amazed," he told me recently. "Not that the company is thriving. He always knew it would, but that you two actually found a way to work together." The doorbell interrupted my baking. I wiped flour-covered hands on my apron and opened the door to find Garrett holding a large cardboard box. "Found these in the storage unit when we were organizing," he said, setting the box down in the entryway. "Thought you might want them." Inside were dozens of family photographs I'd feared were lost, Dad teaching me to ride a bike, Mom and Dad at their 20th anniversary party, the 4 of us at the lake house we used to rent each summer. "I thought these were gone," I said, unable to keep the emotion from my voice. Garrett shrugged, uncomfortable with the sentiment. "Madison packed everything in a rush. These got mixed in with some company records." I invited him in for coffee, half expecting him to decline as he usually did. To my surprise, he accepted, following me to the kitchen where the scent of baking cookies filled the air. Dad's recipe, he noted, taking a seat at the counter. You remember? Sunday afternoons in the fall. Football on TV, cookies in the oven. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. He'd make me help even though I was terrible at it. This small shared memory opened something between us. As we waited for the cookies to bake, our conversation tentatively explored memories of Dad that had nothing to do with the business or the inheritance. He was so patient, I said, describing a complicated joinery technique Dad had taught me. He'd let me make mistakes and figure out where I went wrong instead of just telling me. Garrett nodded. Different from how he was with me. With business decisions, he'd challenge everything, make me defend every suggestion. Different teaching styles for different subjects, I suggested. And different children. The conversation shifted to the company. Garrett mentioned a historical renovation bid that had specifically requested our involvement because of a restoration we'd completed the previous year. Your division's reputation is growing, he acknowledged. 3 new clients cited the Mapleton project as the reason they contacted us. And the Thompson office complex your team designed is being featured in Business Architecture magazine, I countered. That brings a prestige that attracts high-end commercial clients. It wasn't affection between us, not yet, but it was something we hadn't had in years, mutual respect. After Garrett left, I continued unpacking the box of photographs. At the bottom, I found a leather-bound journal I didn't recognize. Opening it, I discovered Dad's handwriting filling page after page. It was a project journal he'd kept for years, documenting significant company milestones. What caught my breath were the frequent mentions of me throughout the later entries. Rachel suggested a modified joinery technique for the Franklin restoration that saved us 40 hours of labor while improving the aesthetic. Her instincts for these historic details surpass even mine. Brought Rachel in to consult on the Westridge molding. The clients were impressed with her knowledge and eye for period authenticity. She's becoming the face of our restoration division without even realizing it. Rachel completed her first solo project management today. Budget maintained, timeline improved by 2 weeks, and client already referring friends. Couldn't be prouder of how she's developing. Tears streamed down my face as I read entry after entry documenting Dad's pride in my work and growth. He hadn't just humored my involvement as Garrett had claimed, he'd valued it deeply, seen my potential, and quietly prepared me for leadership. The next day, I brought the journal to the office, placing it on Garrett's desk without comment. That evening, he called. Did you read all of it? He asked without preamble. Most of it. Why? There are entries about me too. About both of us. Things he never said to our faces. There was something in his voice I rarely heard, vulnerability. He wrote that my financial restructuring in 2019 saved the company during the downturn. That he wouldn't have weathered it without my forward thinking that compensates for my own traditionalist limitations. That sounds like Dad, I said softly. He could acknowledge his blind spots. He also wrote that he worried about my tendency to value growth over substance and hoped you would balance that in me. Garrett's voice had lost its usual defensive edge. He saw us clearly, didn't he? In the months that followed, Dad's journal became a touchstone for both of us. We didn't magically become best friends, but the lingering bitterness gradually dissolved as we each recognized the genuine value the other brought to Dad's legacy. The 1-year anniversary of Dad's death arrived with a company-wide memorial service where employees shared stories of how James Mitchell had impacted their lives and careers. I watched Garrett laugh at tales of Dad's stubbornness and nod in recognition at accounts of his fairness and integrity. Afterward, we stood together looking at a photo display of Dad throughout his career. We're doing okay with this, aren't we? I asked. What he wanted for the company? Garrett considered this. Better than I expected, he admitted. The company's profits are up 17% with your division contributing more than I projected. And clients keep mentioning our balanced approach to modern construction and traditional craftsmanship. His vision, not ours, I pointed out. Maybe. but we're the ones making it work. That evening, alone in Dad's workshop, my workshop now, I ran my hands over the tools he'd left me, each one carrying memories of lessons learned and skills shared. On the pegboard wall where he'd hung his most used implements, I found a small wooden plaque I'd never noticed before. Carved in Dad's distinctive style were the words, "The Mitchell Legacy, Head, Hands, and Heart." I understood then what Dad had known all along. Garrett represented the head, the business acumen and forward thinking that kept the company competitive. I embodied the hands, the craftsmanship and attention to detail that set our work apart. And Dad had been the heart, the integrity and vision that united these different strengths. Now, that heart lived on in the balance we were finding together, honoring his legacy by combining our complementary gifts rather than fighting over who deserved them more. As I stood in that workshop surrounded by the tools of Dad's craft and the evidence of his wisdom, I finally felt the peace that had eluded me since his death. Not because I had won the inheritance battle, but because I understood that the true inheritance was never just the house or the business. It was the lessons he'd taught us, the values he'd instilled, and the love that, despite everything, still bound our family together. Life rarely gives us the neat, happy endings we hope for. Garrett and I still disagree, sometimes heatedly. The wounds of our conflict haven't completely healed. But we're finding our way forward together, just as Dad hoped we would. I hope my story helps anyone facing family conflicts over inheritance or struggling to honor a loved one's legacy while navigating difficult relationships. Remember that sometimes what seems like the worst betrayal can ultimately lead to unexpected healing and growth. If you've experienced similar family conflicts, I'd love to hear how you handled them in the comments below. Did you fight for what was rightfully yours? Did you find a way to reconcile? Your stories might help others facing similar situations. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories, and share with someone who might need to hear that family healing is possible even after bitter disputes. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes our greatest inheritance isn't what's written in a will, but the wisdom behind the choices our loved ones made.